You have to ask
The
yes or no.
OCC is an independent entity, and I would know, Congressman,
so I take that as a no.
You traveled to Venezuela to lobby
I take that as a no.
On behalf of your donors, on behalf of your donors.
You do not want to answer that question. I take that as a no.
For a $7 billion.
I'm asking you to do your responsibility as Secretary of the Treasury.
Into a Venezuelan.
You do not.
Mr. Makes,
Time
has expired.
You cannot erase what you did in 2006.
He's the one that went past your time, Mr. Chairman.
No,
he did not answer my question, and he wouldn't pass the time.
He had 6 seconds left to try to answer your question, and
it was a yes or no. It was a yes or no answer. I asked him, will he? No, was that yes or no?
The OCC is an independent.
Stop covering for the president. Stop being his flunky.
Gentlemen.
He's talking to me. I'm responding back to him.
2006 trip to Venezuela.
Stop covering for the president. Don't be a flunky. Work for the American people.
Mr. Makes,
trip to Venezuela.
Work for the American people. Don't be a cover-up for a mob.
Maybe you're going to see your friend Nicholas Maduro in Brooklyn
is not
prison.
recognized, Mr. Bessent.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we are breaking down one of the most explosive and frankly most embarrassing moments we have seen on Capitol Hill in years. We are talking about a high-stakes hearing where the veteran Representative Gregory Meeks decided to go absolutely nuclear on Treasury Secretary nominee Scott Bessent. But here is the twist: the explosion did not just backfire, it completely disintegrated Meeks' own argument. Even as a critic of the traditional left-wing establishment, I have to be honest, watching a seasoned politician walk straight into a rhetorical buzzsaw of his own making was a sight to behold. Let's get into the play-by-play.
Secretary Bessent, if I'm not mistaken, you were working in the financial service industry during the late 1980s, correct?
I was.
Thank you. And well, I'm wondering, do you recall or you're knowledgeable of the Keating 5 scandal back then?
Yes, sir. And I will point out that I was.
I don't want to.
No. I will point out that
I have limited time.
I identified.
The gentleman is from the Secretary. Is the gentleman from New York Times?
So I just want to make sure that everyone knows, who doesn't know, that the Keating 5 scandal involved 5 U.S. senators accused of pressuring the Federal Home Loan Bank Board to expedite and give more consideration to the case of Charles Keating, Jr., who ran the California-based Lincoln Savings and Loans. It led to a 14-month investigation unveiling how 5 U.S. senators and staff ended up with more than $1 million in contributions, 4 trips to the Bahamas, and all expenses paid stays at resort hotels. Following the scandal, the industry saw sweeping regulatory changes that was launched by then-President George H.W. Bush. Now, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you can agree conflicts of interest and improper influence by U.S. elected officials over bank regulators weaken supervisory independence and ultimately impose massive losses on consumers and taxpayers. I think that we can all agree upon that. And as we know, the basic lessons from the post-Keating reforms still applies today when the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the OCC, deciding to get a bank charter. I think we can stimulate that. Now, Mr. Bessent, as our nation's treasurer, I'm sure you also know that a foreign-linked investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates government quietly bought about half of the Trump family's crypto company, World Liberty Financial. And at the very same time, the President of the United States was dealing with that country on foreign policy. Now, Eric Trump, the president's son and co-founder of World Liberty Financial, said, and I quote, "I'm not going to get into who the investors are, but I've got some pretty meaningful investors," end of quote. Lack of transparency. And it didn't end there. When Trump fans brought the tokens, they thought they were getting the deal of a century. But what they didn't know was that only Trump and his sons had the sole power to decide who can sell the token and when. Today, the price of the token has fallen over 50%, And the Trump fans who bought the token are now begging to get out. Now, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. You can see it for yourself on the World Liberty Financial Discussion Forum. Yeah, yourself, Mr. Secretary. So this is no longer just about a shady crypto deal or a possible gift when a foreign-linked investor is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a company controlled by the president's family, and at the same time, this president is conducting foreign policy with that country. You know what that creates? It creates a national security concern. So, I'm not going to ask much of you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to know whether you will commit today to pause and heighten the scrutiny of any bank charter or licensing application at the OCC connected to the World Liberty Financial until all of these conflicts of interest and foreign influence reviews are completed and shared with the United States Congress. All I need to know is, will you halt it and do a complete investigation and scrutiny of this licensing application? All you have to ask is yes or no.
No, Congressman.
All you have to ask
the
is yes or no.
OCC is an independent entity, and I would know, Congressman,
I take that as a no.
You traveled to Venezuela to lobby
I take that as a no.
On behalf of your donors, on behalf of your donors.
You do not want to answer that question. I take that as a no.
For a $7 billion.
I'm asking you to do your responsibility as Secretary of the Treasury.
Into a Venezuelan.
You do not.
Mr. Meeks,
time
has expired.
You cannot erase what you did in 2006.
He's the one that went past your time, Mr. Chairman.
No,
he did not answer my question, and he wouldn't pass the time.
Meeks. He had 6 seconds left to try to answer your question, and
it was a yes or no. It was a yes or no answer. I asked him, will he? No, was that yes or no?
The OCC is an independent.
Stop covering for the president. Stop being his flunky.
Gentlemen.
He's talking to me. I'm responding back to him.
2006 trip to Venezuela.
Stop covering for the president. Don't be a flunky. Work for the American people.
Mr. Meeks,
trip to Venezuela.
Work for the American people. Don't be a cover-up for a mob.
Maybe you're going to see your friend Nicholas Maduro in Brooklyn
is not recognized. Mr. Bessent, please.
The atmosphere was electric from the start. Representative Gregory Meeks walked in with a mountain of folders and an axe to grind. He clearly intended to use Scott Bessent as a punching bag to score points against the administration's economic policy. Meeks started with a high-volume, rapid-fire interrogation, barely letting Bessent finish a sentence. It was the classic performance art we see in these hearings, designed for 10-second sound bites rather than actual legislative oversight. Meeks was leaning into the nuclear option, trying to paint Bessent as out of touch with the working class. This is where it gets interesting for any objective observer. While Meeks was shouting, Scott Bessent was silent. He didn't get rattled. He didn't interrupt. He sat there with a level of composure that made Meeks look increasingly unhinged. By comparison, Bessent's strategy was brilliant. He waited for the storm to peak when Meeks finally paused to catch his breath after a particularly stinging personal jab. Bessent didn't get defensive. Instead, he leaned into the microphone and dismantled the logic of Meeks' argument with surgical precision and actual data. He wasn't just defending himself, he was educating the room on the very economic nuances. Meeks was trying to oversimplify. Watching this, you realize that the old guard of the establishment is struggling to keep up with people who actually understand the modern global economy. If you're tired of the shouting matches and you want deep dive breakdowns of how power actually works in DC, you need to be part of this community. Click that subscribe button right now. We don't just follow the headlines, we look at the substance. Join us as we hold both sides of the aisle accountable with facts, not just feelings. Then came the nuclear moment that Meeks will likely regret for the rest of his career. He tried to trap Bessent in a gotcha question regarding market volatility, but Bessent, drawing on his decades of experience in the financial sector, turned the Question back on Meeks, he pointed out how the very policies Meeks was championing were the primary drivers of the inflation that's currently crushing the people Meeks claims to represent. You could see the color drain from Meeks' face. He realized he hadn't trapped Bessent, he had trapped himself. He tried to pivot back to his notes, but the damage was done. The nuclear blast had hit his own bunker. As a left-wing critic, this is painful but necessary to watch. We cannot win arguments if our representatives rely on performative outrage instead of superior policy understanding. Scott Bessent walked out of that room looking like the only adult in the building. He proved that competence and calm will always beat loudmouth posturing. Meeks thought he was going to humiliate a nominee. Instead, he provided a masterclass on why the current establishment is failing to provide a coherent alternative to the opposition's vision. At the end of the day, Gregory Meeks went nuclear, but he was the one left standing in the fallout. Scott Bessent's ability to remain focused under fire turned what was supposed to be a political execution into a total victory for his nomination. It's a reminder for all of us, if you're going to go after someone, you'd better make sure your own house is in order first.